for Dr. J.
Yep. Okay, good. Cool. All right. So this is a document that I found out about this morning. I went and read it myself and thought, oh my. This would be interesting if I pissed Jason off.
It doesn't take a lot.
And read it to him. Okay. The only thing is I can't see, so.
Excellent.
All right. Department of English, University of Chicago. Since its founding, the English department at the University of Chicago has committed to questioning and reformulating the basic principles of literary study. Once famous for the Aristotelian Chicago School of Criticism of the 1950s, today the department, ranked first among English departments in the U.S., stands out for its interdisciplinary approach to literature and its commitment to close reading combined with historical and conceptual analysis.
I like it so far.
Our coverage of chronological fields extends from the medieval era to 21st century and includes a wide variety of subfields, media, and genres, including graphic narrative, comics, video games, theater, cinema, and visual culture, poetry, poetics, fiction and nonfiction, gender and race studies, literary and culture theory, global Anglophone writing, animal and posthuman studies, psychoanalysis and affect studies, eco-criticism and climate change. Graduate workshops offer student and faculty opportunities to share work in progress and to read, hear, and discuss current work by scholars from other institutions.
Okay.
The department also supports 3 distinguished journals: Modern Philology, Critical Inquiry, and the Chicago Review, the last of which is run by our graduate students. A vibrant new major in creative writing offers students the opportunity to develop their talents in poetry, drama, fiction, nonfiction, digital media, as well as to participate in an ongoing program of readings and workshops with visiting writers. Faculty Statement, July 2020.
So this is where I'm going to get irritated?
Set everything up
because
for you.
So far, I like it.
Oh yeah, because it's one
That's
of the leading programs.
responsible literary study.
Yeah. The English department at the University of Chicago believes that Black lives matter.
Okay.
And that the lives of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Tony McDaniel, and Rayshard Brooks matter, as do thousands of others, named and unnamed, who have been subject to police violence. As literary scholars, we attend to the histories, atmospheres, and scenes of anti-Black racism and racial violence in the United States and across the world. We are committed to the struggle of Black and Indigenous people and all racialized and dispossessed people against inequality and brutality.
So far, I'm on board.
For the 2021 graduate admission cycle, the University of Chicago English Department is accepting only applicants interested in working in and with Black studies. We understand Black studies to be a capricious intellectual project that spans a variety of methodological approaches, fields, geographical areas, languages, and time periods. For more information on faculty and current graduate students in this area, please visit our Black Studies page. I'm not done yet, and you're making me laugh.
Hang on. Go ahead. I want to bite my hand while you read.
The department is invested in the study of African American, African, and African diaspora. Thank you, diaspora. Literature and media, as well as in the histories of political struggle, collective action, and protest that Black, Indigenous, and other racialized peoples have pursued.
Okay.
Both here in the United States and in solidarity with international movements. Together with students, we attend both to literature's capacity to normalize violence and derive pleasure from its aesthetic expression, and ways to use the representation of that violence to reorganize how we address making and breaking life.
I've only got one problem with the whole thing.
We're not done.
Oh, you know my problem, right?
Our commitment is not just to ideas in the abstract, but also to activating histories of engaged art, debate, struggle, collective action, and counter-revolution as context for the emergence of ideas and narratives. English as a discipline has a long history of providing aesthetic relationships for colonization, exploitation, extraction, and anti-blackness.
Okay.
Our discipline is responsible for developing hierarchies of cultural production that have contributed directly to social and systemic determination of whose lives matter and why. And while inroads have been made in terms of acknowledging the centrality of both individual literary works and collective histories of racialized and colonized people, there is still too much to do as a discipline and as a department to build a more inclusive and equitable field for describing, studying, and teaching the relationship between aesthetics, representation, inequality, and power. In light of this historic... Oh my God, yes.
How long is this?
It's their English faculty, Jason.
This will be the whole podcast.
In light of this historical reality, we believe that undoing persistent, recalcitrant anti-blackness in our discipline and in our institutions must be the collective responsibility of all faculty here and elsewhere. In support of this aim, we have been expanding our range of research and teaching through recent hiring, mentorship, and admissions initiatives that have enriched our department with a number of black scholars, scholars of color, who are innovating in the study of global contours of anti-blackness and in the equally global project of black freedom.
Okay.
Our collective enrichment is also a collective debt. This department reaffirms the urgency of ensuring institutional and intellectual support for colleagues and students working in the Black Studies tradition, along whom we continue to deepen our intellectual commitments to this tradition. As such, we believe all scholars have a responsibility to know the literatures of African American, African diasporic, and colonized peoples, regardless of area of specialization, as a core competence of the profession. Repeat that. Regardless of area of specialization, as a core competence of the profession.
Okay.
We acknowledge universities and our field's complicated history with the South Side. While we draw intellectual inspiration for the works of three writers deeply connected to Chicago's South Side, including Ida B. Wells, Gwendolyn Brooks, Lorraine Hansberry, Richard Wright, we are also attuned to the way that the university has been a vehicle of intellectual and economic opportunity for some in the community and a site of exclusion and violence for others. Part of our commitment to the struggle for Black lives entails vigorous participation in university-wide conversations and activism about the university's past and present role in the historically Black neighborhood that houses it. It's done.
Okay, so you know the part I don't like. There's
Go
one
ahead.
part in particular. Can you guess?
Oh, I probably already know, but you go ahead and tell tell our three viewers.
The fact that if you count us, yes, it's
Yeah,
three.
yes.
No. It's okay. A lot of it, I'm fine with.
Mm-hmm.
It should be available for study if students are interested. But to say that all of your applicants are going to have to meet certain criteria is a problem.
Yeah.
Because what if my interest, and I am interested in eco-criticism, what if my first love is literature and the environment, which is something I took a great interest in?
Mm-hmm.
Am I no longer going to be accepted into the department?
Well, if you're reading Black authors.
Well, and if you and I would agree on this, you should read Black authors because they're a part of the American experience and they're a part of the canon.
But they're making it sound like only.
This is a problem.
Yeah.
This can't be the only thing you get. The other part I reject, while it's true that there are literatures out there that prop up certain unhealthy and rather dangerous power systems. I think that's true.
Mm-hmm.
What about the ones that don't? It's a terribly cynical way to approach something you claim to love.
Here's my other problem. I have the same problem you have. But here's the second part of the problem I have. As such, we believe all scholars have a responsibility to know the literatures of African American, African diasporic, and colonized peoples, regardless of area of specialization, as a core competence of the profession. I take issue with that because let's say I'm entering in, let's say I'm going in now
Yeah.
as the person that I went in before in grad school.
Yeah.
And my focus was on regionalism. Okay, now I'm going to be exposed to some black literature, but my focus...
Which you should be, right?
Yeah, well, you have to, because you got to know the conversations that are happening
That's
during
exactly
the period.
right.
But the majority of the authors I'm going to be reading are going to be white voices, because they're the ones writing the regional literature. Blacks are not writing regional literature. They're writing from a region, but they're writing a different literature.
They have different concerns.
They have different concerns and different politics than the regional writers who are writing from these specific regions within the U.S. And what that tells me is I'm going to be focusing my studies of these regional writers on their interactions with the African Americans in that community, not on the response to being in a region.
Okay, so is this for undergrads or grad students?
This is their graduate program.
Okay.
So all their what they're doing is basically what Carolina has started to do with that comparative lit stuff, you know? Because if you've noticed, they've whittled everything down to one PhD, and that one PhD is comparative literature, which is code for theory.
Yeah.
That's all it is.
The global south.
Yeah.
Yeah. What?
There are a couple of other things that I take issue with, like the freedom of blacks everywhere. So we're only going to concern ourselves with one population.
Yeah.
What about people in Myanmar?
I think a better way to say it would be people of color everywhere.
Yeah.
Those who are under threat.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What about the Muslims in China?
Well,
right now?
and then forgetting the fact that we have a vibrant Middle Eastern literature that's dealing with some of the same issues.
Yeah.
I think it's dangerous for any program. This is University of Chicago.
Mm-hmm.
This is the school that's been courting my son. They really want him. They sent him a poster and everything. They've sent him 5 letters.
The interesting thing is the humanities department the English department is pushing it, so the humanities are pushing this. Some of the loudest voices that are pushing back at the graduate level against critical race theory are coming from UC in their STEM divisions.
It's the risk. I would actually have the same problem if you said the only thing we're going to offer is courses on the Renaissance or courses on the American novel.
Yeah.
You're only going to focus. This is going to be our primary focus, and that's it. That's dangerous.
Yeah.
You're supposed to. It's a part, even for a grad student, a well-rounded education is required, and then you move into your field of study.
They gave us 6 hours of our 36 hours for the master's degree at UNCG. 6 of those hours were outside of our discipline. Okay? My 2, I chose the history of the Bible, which I've told you about.
Oh, yeah.
We only looked at the first 13 books.
That's all you got time for.
That was a fantastic class. And the other was geology. I took an advanced geology class, and I learned so much from that class. I was ready to go out and teach earth science after that class, man. But I mean, you have to have that.
There are things I think everyone should take in grad school. I think everyone should have to have an African American literature class. Everyone should have to have a class in the Renaissance.
Yeah.
Everyone should have to take either an English or an American novel class, preferably both. I think if you're gonna get into, instead of comparative literatures, think about transatlantic studies.
Yeah.
I think saying that this is going to be our primary focus, period, is just as bad as saying we're not going to talk about it at all.
They're forcing, what they're doing is, this is a cover to force an ideology.
Well, presumably, the only people who are going to apply now are going to be people who want to study it. I think they're cutting out a lot of potential here,
Yeah.
and that's risky.
Yeah.
You're supposed to. How can you be a good literature department if you're going to stop being well-rounded? I'm angry. I'm not angry. I'm not angry about some of the arguments they advance about what it means to be black. I'm fine with that
No.
part. I don't care. That's okay.
And you're not going to find anybody in the university that's going to argue with us.
No, but saying that this is it.
This is it.
That's a problem, and
Yeah.
you're no longer performing the role of an English department by
No.
doing that.
Again, this is a moment where they're forgetting they're in the West. They're cutting 70% of the literature written in the West to focus on a smaller portion.
I think it's exceedingly dangerous, and it's not. Now, I haven't seen the course catalog.
Right.
I haven't seen the courses they offer.
Well, considering that this is happening this fall,
Yeah.
you're not going to have that many. I mean, you're going to have a full schedule, but you're not going to see the full breadth. They're probably still putting everything together. I'll have to. That's what I'll do. I'll make sure I get the catalog and see what kind of graduate classes we're
because
looking at.
if they're still offering all these other courses in Shakespeare and medieval literature and the American novel and the British novel, Romanticism, then this is window dressing, and you can just say, okay, whatever. But I have a feeling that their courses are going to be significantly narrowed. Can you imagine being there and being a medievalist and then finding out what you do here is no longer necessary?
Yeah.
What if I want to go to Chicago and I want to study Old English? Is that still a viable option? How much of my time am I going to spend learning about an area of expertise I don't need for what I want to do?
Mm-hmm.
That's not okay. That part is. I mean, if you want to focus your attention on a particular field in English, by all means.
Yeah.
But it's hard enough with just the one field. Now you're throwing something else at the person and saying this is going to. But the harmless bit of it is that now the only people who are going to apply are going to be those interested in that field. I think the university's making a mistake, a big mistake.
Yeah.
Because you're no longer. I don't know how you can claim to be the leading English department in the country if you're going to be so narrow.
This.
No, I don't think so. I
I think Columbia will go back up to number one.
I would agree with you.
Because I remember growing up, Columbia was the English department.
Yale's doing a great job too.
Yeah.
Yale still teaches the classics. I mean, they really do. They're really great at it too.
Yeah.
Listening to that lecture series given by Langdon Hammer.
Mm-hmm.
That's his name, really, honestly. Dr. Hammer. How cool is that?
That would be awesome.
Did an entire course on 20th century or modern poetry.
Yeah.
And he covered African American poets, but he covered white poets too, women and men, and covered the gambit.
Because modern poetry encompasses all of them.
Well, and the other problem with this focus is that it starts to close off. Well, no, the issue is it closes off certain fields of study that should not be closed off.
Yeah.
If you've got a reputation for being the best in the country, then you need to prove it by continuing to foster it. You can tell students, we strongly encourage students to take these classes, or even say, you're going to have at least 1 or 2 classes in African American literature.
Yeah.
I would accept that. I would encourage that. Because if you don't do that, you're leaving out, in your general education part of your major, you're leaving out an entire host of voices. We should read Richard Wright, for God's sake.
Yeah.
You should read Toni Morrison. You should read Langston Hughes.
Yes.
You should be immersed in that.
Yes.
But if your focus is on medieval literature, most of your courses should be from there.
Yeah.
This is a terrible idea.
Yes, it is.
The statement before and after, whatever, fine. I'm on board. This part about this is going to be it for you. It's in Chapel Hill doing the same thing with comparative lit. Why should I have to do comparative lit if I don't want to?
Yeah.
Well, I guess I have to go somewhere else.
Mm-hmm. I think maybe part of it is the idea of your something that you and I have actually spoken about on here about they're shrinking the amount of PhDs. And maybe what this is UC stepping ahead of everybody else to say this is going to be our PhD focus.
And in that regard,
Then it makes sense.
I can handle it, but again, what about the medievalists?
Yeah.
What about the Victorianists?
What about the generic master's degree?
You're going to have to go somewhere else.
Yeah. If you just want a master's in just straight up American or British lit, you have to go somewhere else. Because they're not going to have it.
I know that Ole Miss, and I did my master's in medieval and my PhD in 19th century. They have a Southern Studies program, but you're not required to take any classes in that program.
Right.
You don't want to. It's the home of William Faulkner. You are not required to take a class on Faulkner. Maybe you should be,
Yeah.
given the fact that, he's kind of everything there. But I admire the fact that they don't require it.
Yeah.
That they allow you to choose your own field, and they keep it open enough that you can choose to do Romanticism.
Right.
You can choose to do medieval, as opposed to saying, no, you're locked in. Because what happens if you get there and you decide, I don't love this. I thought I would love this, and I don't love this.
Yeah.
And in grad school, in most universities where they have all these different fields, you can say, or different subsets of the field, you can say, I don't want to study this anymore. I want to go into 20th century poetry.
Right.
What happens if you close that off? They're going to have to leave. They're going to have to go somewhere else. They're going to have to transfer to another university.
Yeah.
This is disastrous.
It is. It is.
And I would have the same reaction if this were all Victorian all the time.
Right.
I would lose my mind. And I'm a Victorianist.
Right.
I love this stuff. But to tell someone this is it. This is all you're going to study. Yeah, you were right. I'm angry. You win.
I knew it.
Again, I like a lot of it, but I don't like that.
Yeah.
What's that going to mean for the rest of the universities? Are they going to follow suit and start focusing only on one thing and that's it, like UNC has?
I don't know. I think, again, and this is the optimist in me, looking at it from an economic standpoint, because the field is so saturated. That the universities are starting to condense down, and maybe they've got this idea in their head that, like, if we pick one thing and just offer that one thing, we're narrowing the field even more. Because these master's kids are going to be like, well, I don't want to drive across the country to go get a freaking PhD at a school I've never heard of, or a school I don't care about. So maybe that's what it is. Who knows?
This is going to backfire.
It is.
You may end up seeing, and I don't think this is the right move for the state, but you may see senators and state congressmen trying to say, we need to start defunding this program.
Yep. That was when I heard about this and I read it, that was one of the first things that popped in my head. I was like, they are going to jump and say, look at the humanities. They're pointless, they're useless, they're a danger.
Which I don't agree with any of that, but
Nope.
I mean, I think it's inevitable.
Yeah. I agree.
So if you're a PhD student at UNC, your only option is comparative.
Lit. And they've done away with the master's. The master's comes with the PhD. You get into the graduate program at Carolina, you're on a PhD track, and along the way you get your master's.
What if you want to study Romanticism? You got to do it comparatively?
I guess so.
Are you gonna? And this is the other bit. Are you going to have to read the other national literatures in the language, or are you going to read it in translation? Because if you're reading it in translation, that's complete bullshit.
Yeah.
You can't call yourself comparative lit if you can't read German and English.
Yeah.
Because you can't read Goethe in English and say, look at me, I have a PhD. This whole thing is bullshit. No, there's nothing about this that makes any sense.
Well, no, but of course it's the university. What do you expect?
But no, when I was there, my mentor, the guy I looked up to who got me into poetry in the first place, was a romanticist. That was his field. He was getting his PhD in British Romanticism. And then we had other guys and women who were getting their degrees in medieval, 20th century. So when you walk into the department, it's like, oh my God, look at all this stuff. We got so many choices. We have someone here who represents, we've got people here who represent every single field of study in English. That's what you want out of the university, not ratcheting it down and saying, we're all going to have comparative literature now. It's too narrow.
Yeah. Yeah, and did you notice, so you agreed with the idea of bringing in black scholars while I was reading it. What that means is they're stacking the faculty.
We'll see. I mean, I'm not saying, and again, you need as many voices as you can get your hands on.
Yeah.
But
if you stack the faculty so that this will actually move in that direction.
But they have to stack the faculty. They have no choice.
Yeah.
They've decided to wed themselves to this. If they don't stack the faculty with African American studies scholars and African American literature scholars, they can't teach the material.
Yeah.
What's going to happen to the British Romanticists? What's going to happen to what's going to happen to scholars who study exclusively female writers?
Well, they won't be teaching graduate students
Exactly.
anymore. They'll be doing undergraduate surveys.
I would be so pissed if I were one of them. You're going to tell me that now we're not going to are they going to stop teaching female writers as a field of study there?
It'll be black female writers.
Well, and great, that's fine. I love it. That's wonderful. But you can't just stop. I mean, of course they have to stack the part. They have no choice.
They have no choice.
In order to do what they're talking about doing, they have to stack it.
My point in bringing all this up, besides the fact that I was, and you gave, bravo, the reaction, bravo.
Yeah, you knew I was going to do it. Did you know when I was going to do it?
No, but I was waiting. I didn't know which part was going to.
Because I was riding it, I'm like, yeah, okay, this is good until 100% of everyone we accept is going to do this.
Yeah.
Oh man, if I were a medievalist, I would be losing my shit.
Yeah.
Like, how can you say that?
Well, and then the other thing is a logistical thing. What do you do with the kids that are already in the program right now? Do you grandfather them in?
I think you have
let
to.
them finish their focus, or are you going to completely shift gears on them and force them to write dissertations that apply this logic?
They'll end up seeing grad students leave.
Yeah.
They'll leave.
Yep.
I can't see Harvard and Yale doing this.
No.
They're too traditional.
Yeah. Or they're too smart.
I mean, they're going to offer it. But
Well, anyway, so the reason why I brought this up,
aside from pissing me off,
because I knew I was going to get a good reaction out of you. That was good. Is the
you can always rely on me.
Huh?
You can always rely on me.
Yes. The realization that, and I mentioned this in your office earlier today, we're watching the university collapse right before our eyes because of this movement. This is going to be the oddest thing you're ever going to hear me say, but hear me out. If we keep going the direction we're going, and they keep forcing this ideology onto every discipline, STEM is literally going to walk away from the academy, and it's going to go private.
And that will be an unmitigated disaster.
That would be a disaster.
Because you can't, if you privatize STEM, scientists aren't going to be able to release the results they think are accurate.
Exactly.
They're going to be working for somebody else.
Yep.
Kind of like geologists who work for oil companies.
Yep. That's what's going to end up happening if we're not careful. Because, and the other thing is, like you and I just mentioned a minute ago, we're going to start seeing them not just cut humanities and social science budgets. They're going to obliterate them.
I mean,
They're going to keep the essentials. They're going to keep writing. But that's about it. They're going to keep writing and maybe like some kind of historical survey of some kind. History is going to be whittled down. They're going to look. You'll probably have political science because you got to have politicians. You got to have staff. But sociology and psychology, bye.
I don't want to be misunderstood.
Lit, bye.
I don't want to be misunderstood because I feel like it sounds like I have a problem with studying African American literature.
Mm-hmm.
That's not my point.
No.
It's easy to because it's such a hot button issue that if you don't immediately agree, then you take the risk of someone saying it's because you're racist, and that's not why.
That's not why.
I would have the same. In fact, I have the exact same problem with the comparative literature major. I would have a problem if they said the only people we're going to study are white males. Oh, hell no. You're leaving out some great writers. Why would you do that? Are you insane?
Mm-hmm.
What happens to studying, this is awful.
Mm-hmm.
No good can come from this. I never even thought this would happen. And I didn't know about the UNC thing until you told me.
Yeah.
And I lost my shit that day.
Yeah.
You can't say you're the best in the country if you're going to whittle it down to one focus, and that's it. I'd love to do the research on this and discover how high they're ranked in medieval, how high they're ranked in Romanticism, how high they're ranked in women's literature. I guarantee you that until today, they were ranked pretty high across the board.
Yeah.
And now, what have they done? They are trying. It's almost like they're trying to commit suicide.
Mm-hmm. It's collapsing. The whole thing is collapsing.
Well, I'm glad I got my PhD when I did.
Well, what did I tell you? What I discovered while I was in graduate school was that the PhD I wanted doesn't exist. And it hasn't existed for a long time. Because when I was an undergrad, I thought, okay, PhD equals reading great literature, focusing on one set of literature, and teaching that literature, and teaching students how to critically engage with that literature. Okay? What I came to realize is that that's not what the PhD is anymore. And it hasn't been that way for a very, very, very long time.
The reason why... So
Maybe I was a just naive kid.
I saw the writing on the wall while I was finishing my PhD, even before then. The older professors in their 60s and 70s loved me. Mm-hmm. And I always wondered why. And it's because I wasn't a theorist.
Yeah.
And then I realized as I'm getting this degree, I talked to one of my other professors whom I loved. She was wonderful. She was a new historicist, interested in feminism. And she knew her stuff. She loved the literature. She loved Shakespeare.
Yeah.
And she taught. She was a freak, when she taught.
Mm-hmm.
But I told her who my dissertation advisor was, and she said, he's out of step with what's going on in literary study. And at that moment I realized, I am completely screwed. I will never get a job at a university with my PhD. I almost did get a job.
Yeah.
At an HBCU. An HBCU that had white and black faculty.
Well, let's talk about HBCUs for a minute, because one of the interesting things, when you look at the introduction of our freshman level textbook at A&T, it says, and I showed you this, studying English in an Afrocentric lens. I agree with that, because where is that? What's an HBCU?
Yeah.
What it doesn't say is that it's the only lens.
No. And I like that.
Yeah.
And I agree with that. And that's That's healthy because you want your students to walk out of there with a general understanding, especially undergrads. You're going to get it all. Go to grad school, you can start making choices.
Yeah. But there is going to be a little bit more emphasis on the black experience. Again, though, what is it? It's an HBCU.
And there should be.
It's supposed to be. If you go to an HBCU and you're shocked that you're getting more of the black experience than other experiences, then you don't need to be going to an HBCU, because the whole point of the HBCU is to focus on the black experience.
Yes.
But for a public university, for a group that's trying to promote quote-unquote diversity, to peg one group and get off your fucking high horse about this bullshit of all we've read are white writers, that is bullshit. The majority of the writers are white because we live in the white culture. But it is not the only writers that we know. And you have heard me say this since the day you walked through that door at Guilford Tech. I still believe, deep down in my bones, the greatest American poet is Langston Hughes.
I know. Oh, we disagree on that.
Yeah,
but
we
that's
disagree
okay.
on that, but that's what I believe.
For me, it's Whitman.
And it's not about white or black. It's the fact that nobody wrote the way Hughes did.
No, they didn't.
And it was completely American.
Now, his blackness informs it.
Yes.
You can't separate the two.
Nope.
You have to talk about it.
You have to talk about it. But when you look at the entire canon,
which you have to do.
You have to do that. And compare him. Okay, so you bring up Whitman. Whitman had a specific audience he's targeting, right? Hughes has a audience he's targeting,
yes,
right? What makes both of them American is that both audiences are American.
Yes.
So don't get off your fucking high horses. I can't stand it when people are, well, it's largely white, right? No shit.
Yeah, it's going to be. And the other reason I have this conversation with my students why it's largely white writers until the 20th century is because minority voices were not allowed.
No.
How can you be a writer if you can't get any kind of education?
If you look at the literacy rates,
yes,
they couldn't tell. They couldn't talk.
No, they couldn't write.
And look at even the slave narratives that we get, they were sponsored.
But look what they did when they got a voice.
Yes, they did.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Starting with Frederick Douglass.
Yeah.
Holy shit.
Yeah.
Harlem Renaissance.
Yeah.
Zora Neale Hurston.
Yeah.
Toni Morrison.
Yeah.
Who might be in the top 10 of all American novelists.
There's no might be, she is. I'm sorry, but Beloved is...
Oh.
What a book.
Oh my God. But you have to contextualize her within white and black writing to understand her.
Yes.
You can't simply contextualize her in terms of black literature. She's responding to white literature.
Yes.
She's responding to Faulkner.
Yeah.
There's no Beloved without Faulkner. There's no Beloved without Virginia Woolf. Yeah. She credits both of them.
So we have to understand that.
I mean, good luck finding a black medieval writer. They don't exist.
Yeah.
There's a reason for that. They're not allowed.
Yeah. Well, how many? Well,
or they weren't there.
I was getting ready to say, how many of them were there?
They weren't there.
That period. I mean, even the white voices that we're getting are chained.
Yes.
You're still not getting the full experience of that period.
No.
Because the largest class of that period is illiterate and not allowed to speak.
Yeah, if you're not a monk or a priest, or a civil servant for the monarchy, you're not going to be able to write. So you've got poor people who have no voice in literature. Mm-hmm. And then when slaves are brought into England, you have black voices who have no voice in literature. Women were never allowed. I mean, the Bronte sisters had to change their names to male names just to be read. And they were loved until it came out that they were women writers, and then they were hated.
Yeah. Well, think about this. Orinoco.
Oh, it's so beautiful.
From a female voice.
Yes.
And that's the most important part. A white female voice.
She wasn't embraced until the 19th century?
Yeah. Yep. I mean, Alexander Pope went after her.
Which is shameful for Pope.
Yeah. But I don't know.
So this is where we are.
This is where we are.
And
And it's imploding.
Well, it's imploding, and the other reason we're in trouble, and the seeds of this were planted decades ago.
Yeah.
The phrase that makes me nervous, and I wish our friend, our traditionalist purist coworker were here to hear this conversation.
Yeah.
Exploding the canon.
Exploding the canon. That's all they're doing.
And saying that white male voices need not apply. You can't leave them out, just like you can't leave out black voices and female voices and gay voices and trans voices. You have to bring the great work in, whatever the great work is, and whoever wrote it. It doesn't matter.
Right.
If you're a great writer,
you're a great
then
writer.
You deserve a place at the table.
Well, and I saw, I watched a very interesting thing the other day where they had a panel talking about critical race theory in education. And it was a young black English woman who said, we don't read Shakespeare because he's the white dominant voice. We read Shakespeare because he talks to everybody.
Yes, he does.
His race is insignificant now. It wasn't insignificant then, but it's insignificant now because all of the stories that we have from Shakespeare are universal. And he speaks to everyone. And the minute we stop doing that is the minute we lose touch with our humanity.
I agree.
But yeah, it's exploding the canon. That's all they're doing.
I am a big fan of expanding the canon, growing the canon. Don't throw Melville out. It's just not a one-to-one correspondence.
Yeah.
In order to bring in a female voice, a trans voice, a gay voice, a black voice, you have to expel a white voice. Why?
Yeah.
Just bring them in and say, you deserve to be a part of the fold. You have arrived. Look at what you wrote. Oh my God.
Yeah.
We need to teach you now.
So, I don't think I've ever told you this story. I was in grad school and I read an article, and the title of the article was Why McTeague Has Been Taken Out of the Canon.
But it's wonderful.
It is. And so I went to the my thesis chair, and I was having one of my meetings about my thesis, and I asked him, I said, by the way, I read an article earlier today that said, McTeague has been taken out of the canon. I said, why do you think it's been taken out of the canon? And I expect him to say something like, it's not culturally relevant, or it's not being read as much, or something like that. Something I would tell a student. His response was, it's problematic now. I was like, it's problematic? He said, it's problematic. That's why they're not reading it anymore. He said, it's a great book.
I got it in high school. Never thought I'd read a book where a dentist played the main role, but whatever.
That's the beauty of American Lit.
It can be anybody.
Anybody can be the main character.
It's a beautiful book. Frank Norris is a hell of a writer.
Yeah. Well, he wrote The Natural, for Christ's sake. And the beauty of The Natural, okay, so the movie...
I didn't know that.
Yes, the movie... No, I'm sorry, Bernard... I apologize. I'm getting it mixed up. Bernard, dude's name was Bernard something, okay? He wrote The Natural. But anyway, talking about The Natural. Here's the beauty of American literature. If you watch the movie, it's accurate until the end. Roy Hobbs hits the home run. In the book, he doesn't hit the homer. He takes the third strike. He takes the hit so he can get the money. In the very last scene of the book, spoiler, not that you people are going to read it, the very last scene of the book, he's walking down the street and a kid catches up to him and asks him to sign the ball, and he can't do it.
It's dishonest.
Yeah. That's the end of The Natural. He doesn't hit a homer and get the pennant for Pops.
Doesn't he, in the movie, doesn't he blow the lights out?
Oh, yeah. Oh, man.
There's sparks everywhere.
When you look at the two pieces separately, they're both beautiful. I mean, the movie is fantastic.
He tears the cover off the ball.
Well, that's in the book, too. But and I wrote about this in an essay I wrote about baseball. I said, in the original novel, which is a commentary about the 1919 Sox and the just disintegration into corruption that baseball had gone, right? That's what the book is about. It's about corruption in the game, all right? And so it's a commentary about that. And I said, but the beauty is that in the book and in the movie, he's the greatest baseball player that anybody's ever seen. He's like mind-blowingly good. Like nobody's ever seen a guy this good. The difference between the movie and the book is in the 1980s, whoever wrote that script, whether they realized they were doing it or not, they redeemed him. And for me, that was more important. When you look at the two pieces, they're redeeming that character, which is what America's actually about. Redemption. I made some mistakes. Now I'm going to work, and I'm going to be better. What these programs are doing are taking away that element.
Yeah.
You are not allowed redemption. And it goes back to that Ben Folds song where he talks about, he pulls up to the stoplight and he can feel someone blasting me with hate, sending dirty thoughts my way because my great-great-grandpa had someone's great-great-great-grandpa as a slave. And then the next line is perfect. It wasn't my idea. I just drove to the store for some preparation H. Right? And he just breaks that whole thing down. But it's right. We're not those people. Did they do those things? Yes. Do we need to continue to work to fix those issues? Absolutely. The work is not done. One thing that Robin DiAngelo is right about is the work will never be done.
Yeah.
But her diagnosis is wrong. Because it's not about white or black, it's about being human.
Yeah.
That's what it's about. And making sure that you have a culture that affords everybody the right to be human. And we are a lot closer today than we were yesterday, and a lot closer yesterday than we were 50 years ago.
Well, this is what Steven Pinker says.
Yeah.
And he upset a lot of people with his book. Because, it's never been as good as it is right now.
Yeah.
We've made so much progress, and it is a direct result of the Enlightenment.
Yeah.
But he was attacked on the far right and on the far left for his views.
Mm-hmm.
Because on the far left, you have theorists who say the Enlightenment is a failed project.
Yeah.
The Enlightenment wasn't perfect. They still didn't emancipate the slaves.
No.
I mean, that's a failure, but they create a system in which it's possible.
But they created a system in which it can continuously get better.
Exactly.
That can always be fixed.
Yes. And it was.
I sent, last night, I sent an email to my lit students and I told them, so next week we're going to be doing the Constitution. Let me go ahead and frame this now. Yes, we will be talking about the more controversial pieces of the Constitution and the Articles of Confederation. I'm making them read both.
Good.
And I said, but what I want you to remember as you go into these documents is that since the fall of Rome, nobody had tried this. They were the first ones. I said, even the Magna Carta kept the monarchy intact. What they were doing was trying to create a government that was governed by the people itself. Self-sustaining. And you have to understand that as you go into these two documents. That's what they're trying to create. It is not perfect. It has flaws. We're going to talk about those flaws. But keep that in mind as you read this. I was basically trying to hint at them, don't listen to all the bullshit you're hearing right now. And just focus on the document and keep the one train of thought in mind. Nobody had tried this since the fall of Rome. 2,000 years before.
The closest we get is the Magna Carta.
Yeah. But and I pointed out to them in the email, I said, even the Magna Carta retains the royals.
Yes.
They still had a king and queen. They just took some of the power away.
Yep.
But it's still there.
Yep. It's a start.
It's a start. And we wouldn't have had the Constitution without the Magna Carta. But we wouldn't have had the Constitution without the Mayflower Compact either.
Nope.
We needed both of those documents to happen in order for us to get to where we were with that. And we had to have the Articles of Confederation to fail miserably in order to get the Constitution that we got. Because the Articles of Confederation is just a joke.
So is this kind of stuff going to get talked about in a climate that's not necessarily friendly to
No.
it?
No, it won't. Not until, but the thing is, and I've seen several different scholars say this, just looking at the trend, looking at the way the thought process of the public is, even though the media is all over it right now, this is like the hot topic for the media, and they're pushing it like nobody's business. And even though you're starting to see business and education giving it the power and sustainability, or some semblance of sustainability, they don't see it lasting. It's going to eventually start to fall on itself. Because the problem with this movement, and this is what you and I have talked about so many times before, and Lindsay talks about it, Pluckhurst talks about it, Bogosian talks about it, Boyce talks about it, they all talk about it. Because it's a known fact in scholarship, and these people at these universities know this. Postmodern ideals are built to self-destruct. They're not built to sustain themselves.
Well, and that's what's going to happen here.
Yeah, it's going to self-destruct.
There's going to be
But how
a
much
backlash.
damage? Yeah, how much is it going to take with it? And I'm looking at the universities, and they're going to take the universities with them because they have bought the farm on this mess.
Well, they started it.
Yeah,
It's sorry. It's where it started. It's where it came from. I mean, of course, we're going to see it come back home, but it's one of those chickens coming home to roost. We're there.
yeah.
You're going to see, and I'd be very surprised. I would love to be sitting in the office of some of the professors at University of Chicago, who are medievalists and romanticists and Victorianists and modernists, looking at each other like, what now?
Yeah.
Am I no longer going to be able to teach a graduate level course?
Well, the question is, what value do I have to the university?
Well, if you're not,
Tenure works two ways.
it does.
We always talk about the thing everybody talks about is, you can't get fired. That's great, but what if you're stuck in a job that you don't want to be in?
Well, and I think we're going to see more traditional professors, and that's the other thing is if you are a traditionalist in terms of reading the classics and teaching the canon, you're branded as a conservative, and this happened to me.
Yeah.
On a few occasions at Ole Miss. I was branded as a political conservative. They knew I was a Marxist. They knew it, but they could not get their head around the fact that I could do that and still want to teach and believe deeply in the canon. They could not square the two, so instead of trying to square the two, they simply said, you're a conservative. We've known each other for 7 years.
Yeah.
At any point, would you ever be able to say I'm a conservative?
Well, there was that one night.
Yeah.
There's that one night when you said something about George Bush and how you would love to
Whoa.
meet him and
Yeah.
do something about a nude. I don't know.
I'd like to have a beer with the guy.
I honestly would too. I bet it would be fun. He doesn't drink anymore.
No. Good for
So, a
him.
cup of coffee.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's clean and sober.
But I was accused of being a conservative because I didn't buy into literary theory. I had significant reservations. I voiced my reservations.
Yeah.
And when they started throwing it at me, I just told them, like, you're not a social theorist.
Yeah.
Stop acting like it. You can't even read German. Don't say you're a Marxist if you can't read German. You're going to use deconstruction, but you can't read French, and Derrida wrote in French. Are
Yeah.
you kidding? You're an amateur. I was very honest with them.
Yeah.
It did not go over very well.
Oh, I'm sure.
But if you can't make these claims, this is why I think the comparative literature degree only works if you're required to know another language.
They view their bodies as something that carries their head around to meetings.
What would Ken Robinson say about this?
Oh, I know. Yeah, I know.
I mean, this is kind of, I guess it's where we are, but I don't see a way out of it except to go through it. You can't go around this one.
No.
They've made their bed. And now they're in trouble.
Yeah.
Or they will be.
They will be.
I mean, if you're not offering degree specialization programs and things like, and I keep coming back to medieval and Renaissance because this is where a lot of these foundational documents in the canon come from, and they inform what happens after.
Yeah. Well, the way I teach my students art movements, every movement that you see is a reaction to the movement before it.
Yes. I do that with my students.
It's Newton. For every action, there's an opposite and equal reaction.
That's right.
For every art movement, there is one that's going to react to that movement.
Postmodernism is a reaction to modernism.
Yeah.
Especially high modernism.
Yeah.
It reacts poorly to high art, so it combines high and low art.
Yeah. What makes the low art the high art?
That's exactly right.
It flips it on its head. Warhol was the king of taking low art and making it high. Taking the poor man's junk and giving it to the elites disguised as art.
Campbell soup cans.
Yep.
Marilyn Monroe.
Mm-hmm.
Those were printmaking, right? Marilyn Monroe was printmaking.
Yeah.
I don't know what I think the Campbell soup cans were painting, right?
Yeah.
It's smart.
Yeah.
But what do you do with Warhol now? What do you do with postmodernism now? Do we dismiss it as a largely white enterprise?
That's why it is built to self-destruct. Because here's the thing. Here's the thing that nobody had. Well, okay, I take that back. In his book, Lindsay points this out. And he does it as kind of like an aside. What's the problem with the guys who came up with postmodernism? They're mostly
White men?
white, cisgendered, Western men.
Yes.
And they gave them this philosophy. So what happens when the movement starts to reflect on itself and see that the very philosophies they're carrying through are the thing that they're fighting against?
Yeah.
That's why postmodernism. That's just one way that postmodernism is built to self-destruct. Because what it does is it goes out and it picks apart and satirizes everything around the postmodern. It then takes all those deconstructions, all that satire, repackages it, and puts it out as new art, which is and it's got the postmodern vibe to it. And then what does it do? It turns on itself and it starts to pick that apart and deconstruct the very way that it deconstructed itself to get there at that moment. And at that point, what you have is the snake eating its tail.
Yeah.
That's the postmodern. That is the mechanics of the postmodern. Theoretical or applied, that's what it's supposed to do.
And the people who are advocating for it now aren't thinking about that.
They don't know. They don't know. You know why they don't know? Because they didn't study it.
Yeah.
A bunch of professors took Foucault, stripped it down, and gave it to them. That's what they know. They were not actually taught all of Foucault. They were not taught all of Derrida. They were not given those moments where the French philosophers said, you cannot actually apply this. It doesn't work. This is all in fun. Foucault said, it's all in fun. It's an exercise. I think that's what Derrida said. It's an exercise. It was never meant to be fully functional because it can't.
Well, Derrida, I mean, deconstruction.
I told you that's how he said it.
What? Derrida?
So in the last podcast I did, I said Derrida. I said Jason says Derrida.
Derrida? Well, that's French. Well, actually, he's kind of the exception to the rule, right? He's Algerian Jew.
Yeah.
So and cisgendered.
But he's still part of that school, and
He is.
You know,
Derrida creates an entire system that says that the work of literature ultimately unravels itself.
yeah,
That's what language does, is it implodes. Because it starts to reveal its own flaws,
yep,
its own arbitrariness. So he says it out. He tells you exactly what happens. He doesn't hide it. It's not veiled. I mean, granted, his writing style is really hard.
yeah,
But you can kind of figure out that what he's saying is, this can't last.
right,
Because the seeds of its own destruction are already there.
yeah,
And so how you can take Derrida and say that this is going to be a sustainable solution?
and he says it can't. It's an exercise. Foucault calls it a game. Derrida calls it an exercise. Barthes calls it death.
And Foucault says, are you sure?
Are you sure?
Or maybe.
Me? Yeah, that's great. Maybe.
The problem I have with literary theory is that it is so cynical.
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of the problem with literary theory now, is that it's so cynical.
The entire postmodern is cynical.
I mean,
Sociology is cynical.
the Julian Murfitt lecture, the guy who basically takes Frederick Jameson apart.
Yeah, and I'm starting to rethink Jameson, but go ahead.
He kind of ultimately points out that it shouldn't be surprising that younger writers are returning to modernism,
Yeah,
because they've had it.
yeah,
They've absolutely had it, because of all, and modernism has its own moments of cynicism,
yeah.
but it still believes there's something to contribute.
Starts with the end of a fucking world war.
It does.
Of course it's got cynicism. Well, the high modern.
But they also believed in progress.
They did.
They believed that literature could change the world.
Well, and I teach my children, my babies in American Lit, too, when we go over the Wasteland. That ending, that last scene in the Wasteland, where he says, where he's sitting there fishing, and there's an arid plain behind him, and the line is, shall I at least set my lands in order? Shall I at least go back and clean them?
Yeah.
Should I do that? And he leaves that question wide open. And I tell my students, the difference between Eliot and the modernist and a postmodern writer, and I use Dr. Strangelove, right? Eliot is optimistic that someone's there to fix it, that someone is there to clean it up. The postmodernist, there's nobody there to clean it up. There's nobody there to fix it, because all has been destroyed. Of course, a lot of that has to do with the bomb.
Does. Modernism's far more hopeful.
Yeah.
Even Camus, who's dark, there's hope, right? Because in Myth of Sisyphus,
Yeah.
it's all about suicide. And what the Myth of Sisyphus is a defense of life. Yes, it's true. There's not a lot worth living for.
All right.
Yes, life is horrible, but you have to go on.
Yeah.
You have to keep living.
Well, what is, Gatsby ends with all that destruction. He comes and he sees Tom and Daisy. Well, he sees Tom, and he has that moment where he talks about Tom and Daisy just being these horrible people. But the book ends with him reflecting on the light.
Yeah.
And then, of course, the very last line is about, here we are, we're adrift on the ocean. There's still hope.
Yeah.
No matter how horrible these people are. Unlike Vonnegut. Well, there's hope at the end of Vonnegut. Well, no, there's no hope in Vonnegut. There's just no hope in fun. Well, Rosewater, there's hope. There's hope in Rosewater. But if you look at the others, like Cat's Cradle, this is what would you do? I would flip my nose, or I would go to touch the Blue Death, and I would flip off God.
The Ivana gets dark,
Yeah, it is. It's funny, but it's so dark.
and he's a postmodernist.
Yep. Well, but saying that, at the same time, the end of Slaughterhouse-Five, Billy Pilgrim looks up at the tree, and a bird is looking at him and says, "Pooty tweet." That's the end of the book.
Life goes on.
Life goes on. So,
That's hopeful.
yeah. That was a backfire.
Not a gunshot.
Yeah.
So Chicago. We wandered a little far afield, but I mean,
Well, no, I did that on purpose because I wanted you to
do you mind?
go ahead. I wanted you to understand where I was coming from when I finally shifted over to the idea that the university is imploding. And I really do think if they don't straighten up, if they don't figure this out and get rid of this, STEM is going to walk away.
Well,
They will be completely privatized.
And I worry that the idea, and I said it already, but what happens when we start seeing the humanities defunded? What kind of education are kids going to get?
Yeah.
What are they really going to learn? They're not going to learn to ask the hard questions, and they're not going to be able to do it in STEM either, because STEM is going to be gone.
Right.
There's room for the traditionalists. That's the other thing that I think bothers me. And I don't know how long we've been talking, but there's got to be room at the table for all sorts of voices from all sorts of scholars.
Yeah.
And hearing them talk to each other is when the student learns, because you're listening to some of the most intelligent critics have a dialogue with each other, and then the student makes a decision.
Yeah.
What makes the most sense to me here?
Mm-hmm.
And if the student decides they want to be a deconstructionist or a new historicist, good for them. And they actually got a chance to hear the debate.
Right.
And they got a chance to make a choice. The choices are being slowly eliminated. And I have a problem with that.
Yeah.
That somehow new criticism is anathema. It's a blight on the academy. It's text focused.
Yeah.
What possible problem could you have with that?
I think the only thing that we have room left for, we need to get rid of postmodern readings of literature. We need to get rid of queer readings of literature, feminist readings of literature, Marxist readings of literature. We need to go back to just straight critical engagement, maybe a reader response.
Well, at the very least, if you decided, say, to preserve those readings,
Yeah.
encourage what's been discouraged now for a long time, and that's aesthetics
Yeah.
and poetics.
Yeah.
I mean, honest to God, if you were to talk to someone who got into literature at a young age, they wouldn't say things like, "Well, I was interested in the politics and the ideology of the text." Dude, you were 15.
When I was reading The Mouse and the Motorcycle in 5th grade, I was thinking about the economics of the mouse versus the child and how both of them are working within this small socio environment.
Well, but the reality is what? I like the way the words sound.
Yeah.
And I like the story.
Well, think about, okay, so talking about Mouse and the Motorcycle, right? Why do kids love that book? It's about a mouse
And a motorcycle.
who gets to ride a motorcycle around a hotel.
What's not to love?
At the end, he gets to be the hero by finding the aspirin and taking it back to Keith so that the kid breaks his fever.
Like I say, what's not to love?
There's nothing, you know, you don't have to break it down that far. And that's that is, okay, and we'll end on this, and he's your guy, that red fucking wheelbarrow, man. That red wheelbarrow, that's an entire course on
Easily.
how to read poetry.
Easily.
That's it.
I've taught entire classes on that poem.
Yeah.
50 minutes of just me telling them why they should care about that poem.
You know, and Marianne Moore, you know, I too
I'm tired of
am
all
tired
this
of
fiddle.
all this fiddle.
Well, I told you how I interpret that line. The word fiddle having a double meaning, and lyric poetry in the lyre, the fiddle is the American lyre.
I know.
But it's
You're
beautiful.
doing exactly what she's bitches about later in the poem.
She does it herself. She too does it.
Yeah, I know.
She's guilty of it.
You're,
She writes an entire poem to say, I hate this crap.
yeah.
If you really wanted to avoid sounding like a critic, you should have just stopped with, I too am tired of all this fiddle. The end. Instead, she discourses on it.
Yeah, she does.
She sounds
No,
like
one
the
of the-
thing she hates.
My favorite part of the entire poem was she talks about, you know, poetry is ragged, poetry is rough around the edges, right? She says that later in the poem, but there's this moment in the middle where she says, you know, we have forgotten that frogs on lily pads are frogs on lily pads.
It's in praise of the world.
Yeah. But she says true poetry is ragged around the edges. It's raw. That's what she says. Ragged around the edges and raw.
Yep.
It is not meant to be all of this.
There's a reason why she and Williams liked each other.
Yeah.
Because Williams wrote some of the rawest literature you can get your hands on.
She was awesome.
She was great.
Oh, she had a beautiful mind.
Yes.
She had a hot mind.
Sexy.
All right. That'll do it for this one. I think we got enough rambling. It's Dr. J. I'm the barber. Peace.
Now it's time for Dr. J.